My daughter-in-law snapped on speaker for Christmas just scrubbed the pots, and the room went so still I could hear my kettle click. I'm a 66-year-old mother, not kitchen staff, so I steadied my breath, wrote down the time, 2:19, and decided I would no longer argue for a place I'd already earned. Instead of showing up to be managed, I stayed home, kept the recording, and let policy, not anger, do the talking. That was only the first quiet move in a much larger game they never saw coming. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from steam, curled from my kettle and hung in the still of my Sugarland kitchen. Winter light slid across the laminate I've wiped for decades, catching the scratch my late husband left with a cast-iron skillet. Above the stove, the wall clock had frozen at 2:19 back in August when the battery surrendered. I never fixed it. Maybe I liked keeping one harmless thing unmoving. Maybe I liked choosing my pace. I rinsed my favorite mug, the flowers worn pale, where my thumb rests, and set a tea bag to steep. At 66, arthritis makes surprises unkind, so I keep rituals, tea ledger work for the seniors club, a slow loop around the block if the air is gentle on my hips. Through the window, the loblolly pine nodded like an old neighbor. The house hummed. Peaceful afternoons don't announce themselves. They simply exist until they don't. My phone began its cricket buzz dance on the counter. I tapped speaker so I wouldn't have to grip it. A bright lacquered voice filled the room. "Hi, Arlis, it's Jody." Her syllables clicked like heels on tile. The answering machine on the wall caught the opening seconds because I let it. Habit from bookkeeper days when missed calls meant missed work. I braced my palm against the cool counter edge. "Hello, Jody." She skipped pleasantries. The pause was thin as thread, then it snapped. "For Christmas," she said with the glide of someone assigning tasks to a catering crew, "just scrub the pots. Don't bring anything." My name didn't appear in the sentence, only the job. The words landed heavy and exact. I watched steam rise from the kettle and thought of the casseroles I've carried through their door hot enough to redden my wrists. I did not argue. I did not list the years I stretched Christmas from food pantry to living room. I did not ask who decided I could be staff. I said, "How's Avery?" soft as I could, because I've learned to ask for my son in ways that don't sound like asking for a child back. The line went dead. The kitchen answered with small noises, the kettle ticking the refrigerator, clearing its throat. On the answering machine, a red number glowed, 012. I looked up at the clock and saw its old truth, 2:19. My hands wanted to tremble. I told them no, wrapped both around the mug and took a slow sip. Water and tannin. Heat and will. I set the cup down and reached for the slim spiral notebook in the drawer, labeled in block letters, "Christmas notes." Bookkeepers don't stop being bookkeepers just because the books change. I wrote 2:19 p.m. speaker. "Jody, scrub the pots, don't bring anything." Tone order. Ink makes a fence. I stood inside it and breathed. A tiny bell chimed from my phone. I tapped the screen. The family coordination app Jody's Pride had pushed a holiday workflow update. A color-coded table scrolled into view like a seating chart. Under Arlis Scrub Trash 12 0018 zeros. A gray note beneath read, "No outside food" by Arlis. My name, my boundary. I felt something cold settle where warmth had been. I took a screenshot, then another in case the truth tried to wriggle away. Old reflexes woke. I created a new album and titled it Evidence Christmas. I saved the voicemail snippet as A1 call bark 2:19 and the app images as A2 app assignment. Timestamps tucked themselves under each, like obedient witnesses. I printed the assignment page on my old inkjet, the one that coughs, but still tells the truth, and slid the warm sheet into a manila envelope. With a black marker, I wrote Evidence Christmas, course, do not discard. The click of the cap sounded like a period. I considered texting Avery. I pictured the look he wears when stuck between me and the life he's building, the look of a man who chooses quiet by choosing the loudest person in the room. My thumbs hovered. I set the phone down. I did not bargain for dignity through glass. Dignity is not a coupon you clip. I poured fresh hot water over the same leaves and watched them blush again. The stopped clock watched me back. If time was going to stick, I could learn what gets built inside a pause. I opened the desk drawer that keeps uncomfortable truths. The printout slid in beside an insurance letter I never needed and a photograph that still hurts. On the notebook's next line, I made a simple list tonight: calls to make none, things to say none, things to keep everything. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled and a child laughed the way air rings when it's almost cold enough for frost. I imagined the sink at their house stacked with other people's pots, my hands in rubber gloves like borrowed skin, and felt a slow refusal rise steady as a tide against a seawall. I would not announce anything tonight. I would keep the ledger and let time do its tally. Breath in, breath out, the smallest rebellion. I carried the envelope to the hall table and set it beside the nativity, my church ladies painted years ago. The ceramic Mary nicked at the hem. Evidence and hope side by side. I touched the clock once gently and let its silence answer for me, so the kettle clicked off. I wiped the counter, set the mug inside its small circle of sunlight, and turned the phone face down so it could look at the dark for a while. The clock above me refused to be bullied into moving. Good. Some moments deserve a frame. I left the kitchen with my tea and flicked the light with my elbow the way you do when your hands are busy holding what you will not name yet. In the living room, the pine-scented candle I'd forgotten to snuff still breathed. So did I. The email slid into my inbox just after dusk when the cul-de-sac outside turned the color of iced tea and porch lights blinked on one by one. Subject line, access type service. I stared at it the way you look at a snake behind glass safe but still something that can bite. I clicked. A tidy e-ticket opened with a banner promising smooth operations for the holiday experience. Beneath the banner, my name appeared neat as a label on a jar followed by the tier service. I took a screenshot, then another. A second attachment weighted a PDF with a glossy seating chart. I zoomed with 2 fingers until the pixels softened and the map resolved into tidy islands of family, friends, kids, and off to the side like a broom closet with a bow on it, dish station. My name rested there, correctly spelled, incorrectly placed. I felt the old bookkeeper in me nod like she'd expected the math to come out this way. I cropped the square, labeled it A3 seating dish station.png, and set it beside the screenshot of the EANS. Scrolling down a familiar sentence punched through the white "No outside food" by Arlis. It was copied from the household app, pasted into the program as if it were policy and not preference. I captured that too, a second angle in case someone later said the context was missing. In the little notebook I keep by the lamp, I logged each file with a time, a source, and a single-line description, exactly how I used to reconcile ledgers at the office when the copier jammed and the boss breathed down my neck. My phone buzzed with the family group chat while I worked. Photos hopscotched across the screen, string lights, a leaning ladder, a caption about curation. Hearts bloomed under each post. Someone typed taste for days, and another chimed in with Jody. "You're a genius." I didn't add anything. I scrolled like a museum guard, hands folded behind my back, and let the silence do the talking. The camera work looked deliberate, like a fashion spread of our history with the tags removed. Halfway through the roll, I saw it, small but shiny, the glass ornament from 1985, the year I was married. It should have been wrapped in tissue in the green bin in my hall closet. In the photo, it caught the light just right, and that's when I noticed the hairline crack that carved through the numbers a winter river across the year. I put the phone down, opened the closet, and drew out the bin. The slot for that ornament was empty. I printed the photo and laid it beside the vacant slot, then took a sing. Under the photo, a comment appeared, Jody's eye for keepsakes, so elegant. I copied the sentence into my ledger with the timestamp. I did not correct it in the chat. There are moments when the truth loses power if you throw it into a room where no one is listening. Better to keep it whole and cool for the day, ears open. The small part of me that still wants to be liked pried at my ribs. Call Avery, tell him how this feels. Explain that the ornament wasn't theirs to display that a cracked year means a story and the story is mine. I poured those impulses into the page instead. Folder updated A4 ornament. Crack A4B bin empty. A4C side-by-side.jpg. 3 fields on each note where it came from, what's shown, what the metadata says. So if a stranger ever needed to follow the breadcrumbs, they could do it without knowing a sigh. When I'd finished, the kitchen had cooled and the cicadas had given the night over to highway hush. I washed my cup, dried it, and set it upside down on the rack. No answering baiting messages tonight. No midnight explanations. I will not beg for a seat at a table that labels me service. If they want a helper, they will meet my ledgers and my rates. If they want a mother, they will use a different map. I brought the printed ornament photo to the dining table and set a tea light beside it. I spoke the year once, 1985, quiet as a vow. That was the year the minister told us marriage would ask for patience, and we said yes, without knowing what patience costs. I blew out the candle, waited for the ribbon of smoke to vanish, and filed the picture in its sleeve. Memory honored, boundary held. Back at the desk, I wrote 2 lines for morning in block letters. Confirm run of show, check for mic settings. You learn a lot about who's in charge by how microphones are assigned and whose names appear on the program. You learn even more by who gets no mic at all. I saved a copy of the seating map to a flash drive and tucked it in my wallet, a habit from years of backing up payroll before storms. Paper can be lost, patterns rarely are. Patterns tell the story. I set an alarm for 9 and placed a pen in purse for steady hands. I shut down the computer. Outside, a lawn sprinkler clicked like a metronome. I gathered my notes, slid the envelope labeled Evidence Christmas into the drawer, and smoothed a hand over the phone that lay face down. Grief does not need witnesses to be real. It needs only to be named. Tonight, I named it, then stacked it with the proof and left it to cool. Tomorrow, I would ask calm questions, the kind that sound like curiosity and function like mirrors. For now, I let the house settle. The stopped clock in the kitchen kept its strange vigil. Somewhere boxes rustled in someone else's garage where my year hung with a crack and a caption. I turned out the lamp and let the room go dark, certain of one thing, at least I knew exactly where to start. By 9, I'd cleared yesterday's mug and set a fresh legal pad beside my laptop. The house was quiet enough to hear the refrigerator click off. Habit steadied me. Date at the top right, subject underneath. If they wanted me as service, I would work like any Tuesday, courteous emails, clean records, no heat. I wrote to the MC on the ticket. Good morning, Lassie. For accessibility planning, could you share the latest run of show I'm confirming where family remarks fit so I can pace myself? It was polite and true. At 66, pacing is logistics and self-respect. I pressed send and waited with my pen, balanced like a metronome. Her reply landed before my coffee cooled. Attached is V3 per organizer updates. The PDF sat in the thread like a folded program. I saved it as A5 run of show, v3.pdf, logged the timestamp, and scanned for Grandma Welcome Grace. When you've balanced ledgers for decades, your eyes land where meaning hides. Meaning lived in the gray seam under her signature, a forwarded line from Jody Please. Remove the Grandma Welcome line and shift to opening toast by host. No emojis, just scissors. I screenshotted the header and the sentence, A6 remove grandma intro.png, and wrote 1 line in ink intent to erase documented. I thanked Lacey and asked a neutral follow-up. For mic check, which inputs are labeled for family remarks? It reads like logistics because it is logistics. Minutes later, she looped in the clubhouse AV tech, Gannon, who wrote in neat bullets. He attached a diagram, input 1, podium wired. Input 2, music tablet. Input 3, grandma wireless pack. The label still lived in the system even if the program had been trimmed. I printed it and circled input 3 in red. A7C, Ava Bu Hui, inputs. Ping went into evidence. The paper slid under the binder clip with A5 and A6. Gannon followed with facts. During rehearsal yesterday, the grandma pack was muted at the tablet. Organizer set it to off temporarily. See grab. The image held 4 cooling words. Muted by organizer. I saved it as 8AV mute log PNG and let the chill pass through like January air from a cracked door. Thank you, I replied. For compliance, does the tablet tag mutes to the user profile logged in? Yes, he wrote. Actions tie to the account at that time. I can pull the timestamp if needed. Straight answers. A good tech keeps a clean log. A good bookkeeper keeps a clean trail. I could have forwarded the thread to my son with a brittle caption, "This is how, but evidence ripens when you don't pick at it." Instead, I printed A5 through A8 penciled cross-references in the corners and filed them so a stranger could follow without my commentary. If a story is true, paper can tell it. Then I chose my voice for the day and kept it small. Lacey, thanks for the clarity. I will not be speaking at the event. The sentence refused both begging and pretense. I didn't explain. I let the system's record stand taller than any wounded paragraph I might write. The house breathed with me when I worked like this. A hallway clock ticked through seconds I refused to waste. Outside, Sugarland held that bright winter blue. Somewhere, a tablet cooled on a counter, holding the tiny record of a tap. I clipped a sticky note to my ledger, confirm clubhouse policy and rider terms. If I am staff in their story, staff language will be mine. I called the number at the bottom of the PDF and left a crisp voicemail name phone, subject the most useful question first. The manager returned my call before noon. We skipped small talk and settled into procedure. I asked whether volunteers assigned to cleanup fell under the venue's labor policies. She explained the boundary between guest access and service access. Policies apply to service tiers, she said. My pen made a tidy check. Additionally, I asked if family property is used as decor, ornaments, framed photos. Does the venue carry liability if something is damaged? She read a clause. Personal items are at host's risk unless a loan agreement is filed. With a loan, we photograph condition on arrival and departure. Another checkmark. When we hung up, I looked at the print from last night, the 1985 glass ornament with a hairline crack lifted from my bin, and hung without asking. I did not bristle. I filled a simple form header item on lone glass ornament 1985. Condition on discovery, crack noted. Paper doesn't heal a crack, but paper remembers it. By early afternoon, my folder had a spine you could feel. A5 through A8 in order. The ledger numbered. The envelope labeled. I closed my laptop and listened to the quiet. You can tell when a room has decided something. It stops making the little anxious sounds. I didn't need to fix the kitchen clock, and I didn't need to fix a family who preferred me invisible. I needed to show up like a woman who knows how to keep score without a scene. If they insist I'm service, then service will come with terms, records, and the kind of invoice that settles accounts you can't see from the dance floor. Before I put the kettle on again, I wrote tomorrow's questions on an index card. Clarity shrinks a maze. Who owns what? Who decides? Who signs? If anyone asks why I am thorough, answer, respect keeps receipts, and quiet protects the heart. I set the folder in my tote, laid my pen across the ledger like a bookmark, and stood. The refrigerator clicked on again. The hallway ticked me toward tomorrow. Aileen called before lunch, her voice steady and warm, the way people sound when they have rules on their side. I set my coffee down, opened my ledger, and asked for the current agreement and any rider still tied to my holiday booking from last year. I kept it pleasant, the way I had with vendors and auditors. Facts first, feelings later. Within minutes, 3 PDFs slid into my inbox like file folders pushed across a counter. Agreement 2023, Rider Amenities 2023, and a privileges ledger. I save-printed and penciled each file name in the margin of my notebook. In the upper corner of the agreement, a line waited for me, almost shy name depositor Arlis Danner, my own name still holding the door. I read the rider's slow lips moving on the numbers. Clause 3.2. It linked any event booked under my privileges to my rider unless a newer one existed. None did. The words were dry as crackers, but they tasted like power cleanup standards. Under my policy, overage hours, tallied to my terms, AV responsibilities enumerated in calm little bullets. I underlined each section, initialed the margins, dated the page. The ledger showed who was walking through the door my name had opened. Organizer J. Caro, privilege class, Danner community holiday, delegated authority umbrella still mine. I could almost hear the rustle of a clipboard and the tap of a tablet, decisions made with a smile that never reached me. Then the number that settled the question of $500 deposit from last year rolled forward and never returned. Aileen explained they keep deposits active unless someone asks for them back. That meant any damage, any overage, any etiquette note would reconcile against the rules attached to my name, then invoice the organizer who used those privileges. Quiet math, quiet leverage. I asked about billing, not in a lawyer's tone, just a neighbor's. Where do invoices go and who gets copied? Aileen sent a protocol sheet that laid it out in arrows. Bill the organizer of record copy, the named depositor. Non-payment pauses, privileges. I thanked her, saved the file, and slid it into a manila folder I labeled Policy Spine. For good measure, I called the HOA office. Ramsey confirmed the clubhouse would keep AV logs and etiquette notes with the reconciliation things like muting a scheduled mic or misclassifying an invited family member as service. Those items could sit beside hours and damages one ledger of conduct and cost. He sounded like a man who'd had this conversation more than once. I wrote one clean paragraph to Aileen and CC'd Ramsey. Thank you for confirming the event is operating under my rider and deposit. Please retain log settings and overage calculations as usual. I will review the reconciliation after the holiday. I signed my full name and let the ink dry before I scanned the page for my records. Then I did small work that holds big things together. I named the new files A9 through A12 and penciled cross-references beside the earlier items: the call, the app, the map, the cracked ornament. I wrote 3 lines on a sticky note and pressed it to the ledger. Do not attend. Request reconciliation. 12/26. Bring deposit forward. Invoice remainder. The plan fit in the palm of my hand. I sharpened a pencil until the shavings curled like ribbon, then wrote a sentence on an index card and read it back to myself as if it were policy too. If they see me as service, then we settle by service terms. I set the card on the folder, closed the drawer, and leaned my forehead to the cool wood. Outside, the neighborhood oaks traded a slow wind between them, and a quiet, useful satisfaction moved through me like a leveled shelf under weight. I did not call. I did not announce. I simply set the table that would matter. By late afternoon, the phone started its little dances buzz, rest buzz, and I let it. Messages rose and fell, planning notes, excitement, a stray complaint about tablecloths. I answered none. It is a kindness, sometimes, to give people room to narrate themselves. It is a boundary, too. When the kettle clicked, I poured watch steam reach for the light and thought of the stopped clock above my stove. Not yet, I told it without words. Some moments do not ask to be fixed. They ask to be marked. I carried my tea to the window and stood there long enough for the glass to cloud and clear. Their event would proceed. Mine already had. I walked the house, once a slow inspection the way I used to close an office at night. Front door latched porch light firm, printer tray reset spare ink, noted small controls that keep bigger ones honest. On the dining table, the printed rider waited beneath a coaster. I lifted it and read Clause 3.2 aloud. It did not shout or threaten. It simply linked one thing to another, privileges to policy usage to accountability. Last year's deposit was not a sentiment. It was an anchor tied to my name. I slid the page back and felt the comfort of systems built before feelings take over. People underestimate paperwork because it is quiet. Quiet does not mean weak. Quiet means documented. At the sink, I rinsed my teacup and left it to dry. Through the window, the clubhouse roofline sat low beyond the trees. That suited me. Let them stage their evening. Let the lights glow and the playlist spin. I will keep the books clean, and when the holiday settles into ordinary days, We'll reconcile line items. First apologies later. I woke before the sun not to dress, not to iron a blouse, but to decide nothing. The decision had been made the minute I filed those PDFs and labeled the folder. I set my phone to vibrate only and slid it beside the policy spine. Coffee rose in the quiet house. I watered the poinsettia on the sill and watched the leaves shine like lacquer. Today my contribution would be absence made with a steady hand. I baked a small tray of cinnamon cookies, the kind I usually packed into tins. 2 stayed for me. The rest cooled like coins on a rack. I cracked a window for the thin Texas winter and wrote a single line in my ledger, attending no. The period was a rail spike. My shoulders lowered like blinds after a long day. Near noon, the arrival window slid past like a train I chose not to board. My keys remained in their dish. The kettle hummed and stilled. I set the answering machine to capture every ring and placed the notebook beside it, pen uncapped. If they cast me as staff, the staff had the day off and a paper trail. The first wave hit after lunch. Unknown numbers, then Avery's name, then the family thread, unfurling like yardage. Are you okay? Turn to this is cruel. Cruel is a word that falls apart when you tilt it to light. I let the phone thrum across the wood and took my notes time sender exact wording. Not replies, notes. The story began writing itself without me. A cousin said I'd fallen for an internet scam. Another hinted I might be having an episode. I copied their phrasing letter for letter like balancing a column. It felt clinical on purpose. The more their theories multiplied, the less oxygen I needed to give them. Noise is a thing you can turn down without breaking it. I set do not disturb for everything but local emergency numbers. I washed the mixing bowl by hand, breathing with the circles my fingers made in the suds. The house smelled like cinnamon and lemon. Control came back the way Tide does, quiet and sure. Dusk brought the second wave. The group chat brightened with photographs, the buffet, a towering centerpiece, the tree at full glow. Beneath it, compliments about taste and curation. There were subtweets about people who abandon family. I printed one collage and wrote in the margin narrative management public. At 7, Nora's name appeared. She never calls for nothing, so I let it go to voicemail and pressed play. She spoke gently, then plainly. She'd stopped by earlier in the week and heard clear as a bell from my kitchen a clipped voice on speaker say, "For Christmas, just scrub the pots." My door had been ajar to the cool air. If things get messy, she added, I'll put that in writing. I saved the message, copied the timestamp, and labeled the file V1 Nora VM. I sent one line to Avery. I'm safe and at home. I'll talk after the holiday. No debate, no apology. I archived the thread and put the phone face down. Boundaries look simple from the curb. From inside, they are architecture and anchoring bolts. Night settled softly. I plated 2 cookies and let a quiet carol play on the radio, the old kind, with a little static at the edges. I slid the evidence Christmas folder over the policy spine and looked at the stack like a simple machine fulcrum and lever. If they wanted service, I would offer service measured, logged invoiced. With the radio low, I took inventory not to fuss, but to breathe through the order of things. A1, the call. A2, the assignment. A3, the map. A4, the cracked ornament that still ached when I saw 1985. A5 through A8, the program and the mute log. A9 to A12, the rider, the deposit, the billing protocol that read like a calm hand on my back. I flattened each corner the way I used to smooth payroll checks before signatures. I pictured the clubhouse lights, the bustle, the nervous laughter people use when a program runs late. I knew the run of show by heart. I also knew how a room feels when the person meant to tie up the welcome simply isn't there. Somewhere, a mic sat labeled Grandma Silent because someone told it to be. Silence is an answer, and also a ledger entry, no output recorded. Outside, a pair of teens jogged by their shoes, tapping the sidewalk in counterpoint. In the living room, I straightened a frame on the mantel, my parents in Galveston, my father's hat, too big. My mother's smile, brave. I checked the angle and left it slightly off the way memory always is. When the messages finally thinned, I folded the day shut. I rinsed the sink, set the towel to dry, and turned off the lamp over the stove. In the hall, I paused by the stopped clock and decided I wouldn't fix it until I wanted a new moment to measure. Not today. Today had kept its own time. A sprinkler ticked somewhere down the block. I washed my cup, shut the window, and checked the locks by habit. Sleep came early and cleaned the best of the week. Tomorrow would be a Sabbath I made myself. On the 26th, I would reconcile, and by reconcile, I meant add, subtract, copy, send. Before turning in, I wrote 3 lines on a card and tucked it under the paperclip Invoice draft. 12:26, 9 a.m. Attach Nora VM. No explanations. I left the card face up so morning had its first instruction. The house exhaled. So did I. I was not missing Christmas. I was keeping something truer, my name, my place at my own table, my right to be spoken to as a person, not an appliance. That would be my gift to myself, paid in quiet and kept. Enough for me. I woke before the sun. The house as square and quiet as a ledger. Coffee gurgled, the heater clicked, and I laid 2 folders on the kitchen table. Policy spine and evidence Christmas. Numbers calm me. They ask only to be arranged. I stacked printouts in date order, read every timestamp, and drew a neat line under the last entry. If they had cast me as service, then service would speak in its native tongue terms, exhibits due dates. I drafted a subject line that neither begged nor barked, Invoice Namrauser 1 Community Holiday Event. Organizer J. Caro. Beneath it, I typed a single paragraph that any clerk could follow. Reconciliation of facility use, AV oversight cleanup variance, and overage hours per rider. I cited clauses the way I used to tag transfers at the office. It felt like muscle memory, honest work, no audience. Rate sheets are just translations of rules. I translated my rider into line items. Base facility block at the posted rate. AV labor for the scheduled mic that was labeled for grandma, regardless of whether someone thumbed it to mute. Cleaning variance for the extra bins and floors left after community holiday. Potential damages marked pending. Next to each, in small type, I wrote the source file, A10 Rider A12 Billing Protocol, A7AV Inputs, A8AV Mute Log. The page looked tidy enough for an auditor and plain enough for a tired volunteer. When the totals balanced, I exported a 1-page PDF and attached the exhibits. I addressed it to Aileen at the clubhouse, copied Ramsey at the HOA, copied Jody as organizer of record, and included Avery for transparency. I read the body once more the way you check a front door before bed and pressed send. The email left with no heat, only gravity. I printed a hard copy and slipped it behind the invoice tab in my binder. The confirmation came in minutes, polite, neutral. My favorite tone for business. Aileen acknowledged receipt and said reconciliation had begun. Logs were retained per protocol. She estimated a timetable and thanked me for clear documentation. I breathed in the smell of cooling coffee and wrote, Invoice Dakava 1, sent net 7 on a blue sticky note for the edge of my monitor. Notifications pulsed along the bottom of the screen, a read receipt and auto reply. A text preview from Jody lit and dimmed like a porch light, but I didn't open it. I updated the index at the front of my binder instead, A1 through A13 now in sequence, and slid a thumb drive into the side of the laptop to make a second copy. Houses and files stand by respect. Policy has teeth if you let it chew. I opened a fresh message to Ramsey and wrote a single line. Please place the organizer's privileges on administrative hold pending settlement per protocol, D. He answered in the same key I had chosen. Brief, exact, impersonal. Flag applied. Outgoing bookings require clearance. No exclamation points, no commentary. Systems were doing what systems do. A formal notice followed. Ramsey emailed Aileen and me that organizer status J. Caro was flagged until the balance cleared. Any future facility request would prompt a settlement check. I saved the PDF as A13 priv flag and stapled it to the printed invoice. I thought of the December night I stood in my own quiet kitchen and heard for Christmas just scrub the pots. The line had sounded so final. This one was kinder outstanding balance holds privileges. Same shape, different weather. On a fresh sheet, I penciled a follow-up checklist, confirm housekeeping overage with custodial log, request AV time card, photograph floor condition reports, prepare invoice #2 if warranted. None of it was threat, it was maintenance. I date-stamped the list and tucked it behind the invoice. Work like this keeps grief from dictating tempo. When hands move in sequence, the heart breathes more slowly. Courtesy still belongs to family, even when distance does. I typed Avery a single text. For transparency, you were CC'd on a facility reconciliation. I'm available next week if you want to talk. I didn't add an explanation. Mothers are allowed to let the facts stand. I made tea and tidied my desk the way a nurse preps a tray, everything labeled, everything within reach. I added an index page to the front of the binder so that a stranger could follow the order without knowing a thing about us. Exhibit sources, dates, who received what. I wrote a note for myself. If contacted by HOA or organizer, refer to invoice number and protocol, then pinned it above my screen. A house grows quiet when each thing has a place. By early afternoon, the sun warmed the blinds and left a bright ladder across the table. I shut the laptop, capped my pen, and looked at the 2 folders that had carried me through December. Policy spine. Evidence Christmas. I had not raised my voice. I had not argued in a group chat. I had poured coffee match numbers and asked systems to do what they promise on paper. If I was staff in their story, then the story would be settled by staff terms. Before I left the room, I wrote 7 characters on a card and taped it to the wall where I could not miss it in the days ahead. Net 7. Underneath, in smaller letters, I added what I wish someone had handed me years ago when the lines first blurred. I don't fund contempt. Quiet isn't emptiness. It's a choice. I can keep mine. When the kettle clicked off, I let it stay warm and let the house stay still. Aileen's email was waiting when I sat down with my coffee. Subject, reconciliation packet. Inside were 3 attachments: overage log .csv, sanitation report.pdf, and AV incident notes.txt. I downloaded each, saved them as A14, A15, A16 in my binder, and wrote the time in my ledger. The house was quiet enough to hear the heater click. I highlighted the lines that ran past the booked block and drew arrows to the notes column. Numbers do not gossip. They simply stand where you put them. I mapped minutes to money the way I used to for year-end. Overage was listed in 6-minute increments. The rider says round to the next block. Clause 3.2. Clause 4.1, familiar bones. The sanitation variant spelled out the mess without adjectives. Oil pans, stuck-on debris, late handoff to custodial. I underlined handoff delayed and circled the time of the final swipe. If you want mercy, tidy the room. If you want policy, leave a trail. I called Aileen with 2 neutral questions. Are these minutes already rounded per policy? Yes. Is the sanitation variance coded as post-event corrective yes with photos on file? She CC'd the custodial supervisor, Dale, so totals would not wobble later. I thanked her and let silence hold. Polite, precise, and on record, that trio will carry a person farther than any speech. Dale's reply arrived with the calm of a shop foreman. His team stayed 42 minutes past the contracted hour to degrease pans and reset the dish area. Badge swipe records showed the organizer's tablet lock wasn't surrendered at 10 p.m., which delayed mop-out by 13 minutes. He attached the tally and the 2 relevant photos. I saved A17 overage final.pdf, labeled my printout, and slid it behind a clean divider. With the spine of facts set, I drafted Invoice, the Guao2, Overage and Sanitation Community Holiday Organizer, J. Caro. Line items read like a plain grocery list. Overage 40 minutes rounded per rider. Sanitation corrective per variance report. Administrative processing per protocol. Terms net 7. Exhibits A14 through A17. I sent it to Aileen for billing, CC'd Ramsey at the HOA, CC'd Jody as organizer, and copied Avery for transparency. The email was as cool as a glass of water. I turned back to the AV notes, the page that mattered more than any thread. Wireless pack labeled Grandma muted at organizer tablet during rehearsal. No guest-level misconduct observed. The sentence was so plain it couldn't be argued with. I underlined it once and wrote etiquette in the margin. People can debate tone forever. Logs shrink the room to yes and no. By midday, Ramsey issued what policy calls an etiquette notice. He addressed it to the organizer of record and copied me and Aileen. It cited 2 findings: misclassification of an invited family member as service and guest management tools and unauthorized muting of a scheduled microphone input. Before further bookings, the organizer needed to acknowledge the notice and complete corrective training with the clubhouse. No drama, no moral. Just the gate closing until the latch is tested. My reply was 1 paragraph that fit on a postcard. I confirmed receipt of the notice, and both invoices thanked Ramsey and Aileen and requested the standard reconciliation timeline. I did not add feeling. Feelings are real, but they do not belong on paperwork. I returned the notice to its folder and wrote each document number in the index, so a stranger could follow without asking me to retell December. Message previews stacked along the edge of my phone. Jody's name, then ellipses, then another line. Accusation leans on caps. Bargaining leans on emojis. I opened none of them. I set the device to silent and entered both invoice numbers in my ledger with their due date 7 days from issue. If someone needs me, they can reach me through the address at the bottom of the invoice like everyone else. Order returned to the room the way heat returns after the blower kicks on. I backed up A14 through A17 to the thumb drive labeled A New Divider Invoices and slid it between Policy Spine and Evidence Christmas. I brewed tea and stood at the sink while the kettle rumbled. 2 invoices and an etiquette notice will make most people quiet, but publicists live on spin. If spin was coming, it would have to bend around numbers. I set the cup on a coaster, capped my pen, and let the house be still. Before I filed the thumb drive, I opened the paper calendar and blocked the next week in quiet squares, a 10 a.m. window for billing calls 2 afternoons, for reading on the patio if the weather held, and Friday morning for the seniors' club bank deposit. Routine is a handrail. You reach for it without looking. I folded the small laundry basket, matched the socks the way Avery liked when he was 10, and slid a cinnamon cookie into a tin with wax paper. On the fridge, the seating map printout still hung by a magnet shaped like Texas. I studied the little box that said Dish Station. My name printed neatly under it and felt nothing sharp, only a cool recognition that labels tell on the person who writes them. I checked the porch, brought in the mail, and stacked envelopes by the lamp. On top, I placed the etiquette notice face down. You can let a paper speak without giving it your whole evening. I turned off the kitchen light and watched the window go dark, my reflection looking back steady, older, not erased. I checked social after breakfast, not out of hunger for news, but to keep my files honest. Jody's holiday recap sat at the top of the feed, a neat carousel of smiling faces, glassware in rows, evergreen garlands, captions about community and grace under pressure. I didn't react. I read. When a person tells a story loudly, the quiet parts usually stand in the background, patient as furniture. Her caption pressed the bruise without saying my name. Some people chose not to show up for family, but the ones who did showed love. I took no bait. I opened a new folder on my desktop public posts, Deck 30, and dated it. Screens lie less when you keep the date straight. On slide 5, the room went wide, the seating wall a grid of laminated strips fixed to linen. Near the bottom right, small enough to miss unless you already knew a label, read Access Type Service, Arlis D just above Dish Station. The font matched the e-ticket from 2 nights ago. I took 3 captures, full frame crop and closer crop, then saved them as P1R full, P1R crop 1, P1R crop 2. Confirmation doesn't always arrive with a drum roll. Sometimes it hangs there like a price tag someone forgot to. I downloaded the image at original size and pulled the metadata. Local timestamp device model geotag off as most people do. I exported the XEF to a 1-page summary, printed it, and wrote a cross-reference in my ledger to A2 and A3. If anyone asked later, these were not my words. They were her images. Her stories rolled like a reel from a separate life kitchen pans, flashing AV table neat row of cables, laughter swelling and fading. I set my phone to record the sequence. In a 2-second pan, the camera skimmed the same wall. The service strip flashed again, laminated and tidy. I paused on the wall, texture the pin, spacing the table at the edge that matched the carousel still. I saved the file as vid S14 sec and jotted the time. Proof isn't loud, it breathes. A message request blinked at the top of my screen from someone I didn't know. "Hi, this is Mara from the catering team. I saw your name on a strip by Dish Station. When we asked about a seat for you, we were told, she's just staff, not family. If you need a note for management, I can write one." I read it twice. I replied with one line. "Thank you." A brief statement with date and time would help. Within the hour, an email landed with a simple letterhead, Mara Cho, sous chef. She wrote the quote she heard the time window during setup and signed it with her full name and contact number. No embellishment, no jab, just kitchen truth. I saved it as Pidu Mara's statement, thanked her, and asked permission to share with management if required. Her reply came fast, yes, use as needed. I filed the package without fanfare. P1 carousel stills plus metadata. P2 the statement. I slid a new divider behind invoices and labeled it Public Posts. On a small sticky, I wrote Public Corroboration of Service Classification. I did not post, like, or comment. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it is scaffolding for the next beam. Only one administrative step remained. I forwarded the materials to Aileen and Ramsey with a plain subject line, Supplemental Documentation Community Holiday Event. My note was 2 sentences long. For your records attached are public images showing the classification label and a statement from kitchen staff about instructions they received. No action requested, adding to the file. I attached the P1 package and P2 then clicked send. I closed the window the same way a bookkeeper closes a drawer after. I brewed tea and watched the steam find the light above my sink. The house kept its small sounds heater neighbor's truck, a sparrow tapping at the pane. On the fridge, the Texas magnet still held the printed seating map. I looked once more at the tiny square where my name was pinned beneath Dish Station and felt the strange relief that comes when a thing names itself. I don't have to call it unfair. The label already did. Near noon, another wave of polished posts appeared, now talking about teamwork and lessons learned. I didn't read past the first lines. People devoted to performance keep staging rooms even after the audience leaves. I washed my cup, dried it, and set it on the same coaster as yesterday. By late afternoon, the sun shifted over the driveway and lit the binder on my table. P1 sat behind the tab P2 behind it each, with dates, times, and arrows. The phone stayed face down. I wrote one sentence on a fresh sticky and pressed it to the inside cover. When their story gets louder, my evidence gets clearer. Then I shut the binder and let the room grow quiet. Payments were due by week's end. I did not sharpen an argument. I sharpened a pencil. If a reminder needed to go out, it would be 10 words long and carry all the weight it needed. Please settle invoice 01 and 02 per policy by close Thursday. I placed the pencil next to a stamped envelope and turned off the lamp. Some tables flip with speeches. Mine flips with receipts. Before shutting down my computer, I glanced at the tag list under Jody's post. Avery's name sat there blue and obedient, a tiny bead of glass threaded onto someone else's string. I didn't tap it. A mother learns eventually that love can wait while facts take their seats. The heart wants to rush the room. The ledger asks it to sit and breathe. I chose the ledger. I set the tone on New Year's Eve with coffee in quiet order. The binder lay open on the dining table. Invoices when 2 clipped together dates circled in pencil. Net 7 underlined twice. I read the terms once more, not because I doubted the math, but because ritual steadies the hand. 10 calm words would be enough. I typed the subject line and said them out loud as if testing a latch. Friendly reminder, invoices, 01 Bo2 due per policy, thank you. I kept the body plain. Invoice numbers, original, send dates, attached PDFs, and one neutral line about protocol, FARBA 4.B requiring settlement before new bookings. I addressed Aileen in billing, CC'd Ramsey at the HOA, CC'd Jody as organizer, and CC'd Avery for transparency. No lecture, no history, no temperature. I hit send, closed the laptop, and rinsed my cup. Aileen's reply arrived within minutes, efficient as ever. Logged. Reconciliation pending. No payment received as of this morning. She confirmed the privileges flag remained on the organizer account. I printed her note, wrote R1 reminder to 11231 at the top, and slid it behind the Invoices tab. Silence followed a clean, useful kind. I chose not to fill it. I walked the loop of our cul-de-sac winter air, thin and honest. A plastic snowman leaned in a neighbor's yard, the kind that glows from the belly. Somewhere, a wind chime tried to make a song out of a cold breeze. By noon, I was home again, heat humming. Binder, closed phone, face down. The clock did its quiet work. I let it. January 2nd woke the policy. At 8:14, Aileen's email landed first. Net 7 elapsed. Per protocol, late fee added. Privileges hold extends to scheduling window. Ramsey followed with a formal HOA notice that read like stainless steel, the organizer must settle the balance and complete etiquette acknowledgement before any new dates are approved. I saved both, labeling them A18 late fee and A19 hold extend, and I underlined the phrase extends to scheduling window. Leverage can be cold, it can also be clean. My acknowledgement back was one paragraph. Thank you for applying protocol. Please include updated totals in the reconciliation statement. I didn't add color. My ledger doesn't need adjectives. I entered the new codes on the index page, then sharpened the pencil and set it beside the binder like a small flag. Then my reminder to Jody bounced. Mailbox. Full, temporarily unavailable, the server said bland as toast. Ramsey copied on the bounce, wrote that HOA records require a verified contact for any organizer and that the email listed on the event form did not match the homeowner file. Did I have an alternate? I answered truthfully. None beyond the address on her invitations. We were all adults here. The system could walk the rest of the way by itself. Ramsey initiated the certified route before lunch. The HOA assistant prepared a packet with both invoices, the etiquette notice, and the late fee addendum addressed to the organizer's contact on file. Delivery receipt required. Aileen logged contact escalation in the billing record and attached the tracking number. I saved the PDF of the notice as A20 certified, wrote the tracking number in my ledger, and stuck a small square of tape over it so the ink would not smudge. I texted Avery one courtesy line. Administrative update HOA, applied late fee OSH hold. Certified notice issued to organizer. You remain CC'd for transparency. The dots pulsed, then vanished. I put the phone back on the table. A mother can choose what not to chase. The house settled into its afternoon noises. I made tea and watched the steam rise as if it were measuring time. The binder sat where the sun could reach it. I thought of the stopped clock above my stove and left it stopped. It had its own position in this story. Some hours you do not fix. You mark them and move on. By 3, Ramsey confirmed the packet was at the post office. Out for delivery tomorrow, he wrote. I thanked him, and nothing more. I do not gloat over rules. I let them stand upright and do their work. 10 calm words were all it ever took, words that held no heat and yet touched every switch that mattered. I wrote those words on an index card and pinned it beside the penciled Net 7. Please settle invoice 001 and 002 per policy by Thursday. 10 words, no siren. I cleaned the mug, wiped the counter, and placed the binder back in its drawer. The house was quiet enough to hear the heater kick off and the soft tick that follows when metal cools. Before dusk, I checked the porch and found a free newspaper shoved in rubber band and plastic sleeve. I left it there. The only delivery I cared about now would require a signature. If it came back unclaimed, the file would record that too. Records do not flinch. Evening gathered itself outside the windows. In the living room, the Christmas lights I never hung remained packed away, each strand looped and rubber banded for next year or not. I sat at the table and looked at my hands. They were my mother's hands, older now, steady. They could scrub pots. They could also balance books. Today, they did the latter. When the heater started again, I closed my eyes for a moment the way you do when a hymn ends and the last note hangs over the pews. This is not winning. This is not revenge. This is refusing to fund contempt and asking the clock to keep honest time. The rest will happen as it must, by receipt by ledger, by the quiet weight of a signature that isn't mine. I arrived early as I always do when something matters. The January sun lay pale across the clubhouse lawn, the fountain throwing a thin ribbon of water that the wind kept teasing apart. Inside the conference room held the kind of quiet that makes you lower your voice without being told. Ramsey Knox greeted me with a nod and slid a placard to the center of the table, proceedings recorded for minutes. Aileen set a tidy stack at his right hand, my invoices, the late fee notice, the etiquette letter, each corner squared to the table's edge. Ramsey reviewed the plan in that patient HOA cadence I've heard for years: reconciliation review, etiquette, follow-up and contact verification. No speeches, no interpretations. He clicked the recorder on. A red light winked. Aileen's pen hovered. When the door opened again, Avery stepped in a half-second late, as if he had floated in the hallway to see if I would turn. I didn't. Ramsey motioned him to the back row. Family observer, he said for the record. Avery sat hands-folded eyes on the table edge. Ramsey placed a single sheet before us. Today's agenda, he said. He read the header into the microphone, stamped the start time, and paused. Aileen aligned the exhibits with a bookkeeper's precision, A18 through A20, then Invoice Nummerhauser 1 and Invoice Throwacher 2. It looked like a ledger, because it was one. Dates, amounts, signatures, nothing ornamental. He began with the facts that do not ask anyone's memory to help them stand. First, he read documentation of guest classification error. He lifted a photo of the seating wall with my name printed and laminated, access type service, Arlis D. His tone did not change. Second AV incident wireless pack labeled Grandma, muted at organizer tablet during rehearsal. Aileen confirmed the log and stills. She slid a note so he could cite file names exactly. He added the corrective requirement etiquette, acknowledgement before new bookings. We moved to the numbers at the same temperature. Aileen summarized line-by-line facility base, AV oversight cleanup variance, overage rounded per policy sanitation corrective. I confirmed totals by invoice number, net 7, late fee applied, hold extended. Ramsey repeated each term for the microphone, then paused to let the room catch up. The fountain outside kept its ribbon going, and for once, the wind left it intact. Contact verification came next. Ramsey noted the email bounce and the certified notice already in motion. Delivery receipt pending, he said, and Aileen wrote the date. He asked whether I had any alternate contact information to add. No, I said, just the address on the invitation. He nodded, noted. The recorder clicked softly as it marked the time. There was one sentence that needed to live in the transcript, and he gave it air. For the minutes Ramsey said eyes on the page, the individual labeled service was in fact an invited family member, Mrs. Arlis Danner. It wasn't an apology, not his, to give. It was the truth put where a caption can't move it. I did not turn. Behind me, somewhere in the back row, I heard a breath go out of my son like someone had opened a window. I spoke once. Thank you for applying policy, I said. I will communicate by invoice number and protocol. The microphone caught it. Aileen wrote it. Ramsey nodded. The right size of sentence had been used. We reviewed the action items, delivery, receipt, payment, window, etiquette, acknowledgement, hold maintained until both are complete. He read each aloud for the slow rhythm of the recorder. No one hurried. No one raised a voice. We closed the meeting the way you close a book. Ramsey read the end time. We signed the attendance sheet. Aileen stacked the exhibits and slipped a copy of the agenda into a folder labeled Minutes Jan 3. The placard about recording went back into his briefcase as if it lived there between Tuesdays and Fridays. Chairs scraped, coats came off hooks, ordinary motions after an unusual month. Before dusk, I walked the block once the way I do after heavy weather. Neighbors waved the small winter wave, a mitten lifted, nothing asked. The day had been made of paper agendas, notices, minutes, and yet it felt solid. Words set down in order can hold weight. They do not comfort, not exactly. They hold. And holding was enough for now. The rest could arrive later by mail like every other ordinary consequence. I washed the cup and set the deadbolt. On my way to the door, I tucked my pen into the spine of my binder. Avery's hand brushed the back of the chair I had used, not to pull it out for me or push it in, not to say stay or go, just to touch what I had occupied. I did not interpret it. Mothers are expected to read every gesture like scripture. I let that one be a mark in the margin. Outside, the air had that bright winter smell of sun on cold concrete. I walked to my car without looking back. At home, I slid the agenda behind the tab, already labeled minutes. I added a new index number, A21, and a note audio available upon request. Then I boiled water, rinsed the pot, the way my mother taught me, and poured tea. The house accepted the quiet like a room accepts light. Minutes don't need gratitude. They only need to be kept. Tonight they would sit in a drawer and I would sleep with the simple comfort of a sentence on paper that finally said what everyone else kept trying to narrate for me. I kept the record. The green stamp arrived at 8:42 a.m., delivered signed. I printed the receipt, slid it into my binder as A22 and let the house keep its quiet. January light lay thin across the table. The kettle clicked once and stilled. The system had spoken in its tidy font. My job, as always, was to file and breathe. Ramsey's email followed 2 lines, nothing decorative. Delivery confirmed. Etiquette acknowledgement pending. Privilege hold remains. I answered with 2 words, received thanks, and wrote the timestamp in the margin like I used to do when reconciling month-end ledgers. The neatness didn't comfort me. It steadied me, which was better. By late morning, Aileen's Forward Chimed Finance had posted a payment. The amount matched Invoice's NARI1 and D2 with the late fee on top. But in the memo line where names should anchor facts sat 3 small letters pretending at generosity, holiday donation goodwill. I let the kettle reboil and set a cup down untouched. Memo lines tell you who someone thinks you are. I drafted the note in my bookkeeping voice. Please return for correction of memo language. This is settlement of invoices. Sewer 1-2 facility AV sanitation overage with late fee per protocol. Paragraph 4D. No donations involved. Remit with correct memo fields. Prepare 10999, NEC as applicable. My W-9 is enclosed. I attached the form, listed the exhibits, and asked for amended remittance advice. It was precise without heat, like measuring flour. Aileen replied within the hour. Payment voided finance will reissue with proper invoice references. Thank you for clear documentation. Reconciliation will reflect exact line items. I printed her line because accuracy like civility deserves paper. The page went behind invoices the way a dish goes back on the right shelf. Before noon, the kitchen side awoke. Mara's statement had reached the caterer's general manager, and a short internal memo landed in my inbox. Staff were told verbatim, "She's just staff, not family," when they asked about a seat. A remedial briefing on client directives was scheduled. Names redacted, tone clinical, the way a temperature is read. The clubhouse received it as a courtesy. The file received it as a rib to strengthen the spine. Ramsey logged it in that careful HOA language third-party corroboration, received and extended the organizer's training requirement to include guest classification controls. The privilege hold remained until payment and etiquette acknowledgement were complete. Future bookings would prompt manager review. Policy like winter settles in layers. You only notice it when you step, and the ground doesn't give. Mid-afternoon brought an envelope in my mailbox cream stock and a faint perfume I knew. Inside a business card, no note, and a cashier's check with a flourish on the memo line, family reconciliation gift. I laid the card on the table, took a photograph of the check front and memo, and filed them as P3 and P4. Then I walked to the counter, wrote a short cover sheet that listed invoice numbers and the correct wording, and returned the check by mail. Gifts are for bridges. This was a bill. I sent Avery one brief text: administrative update, certified notice delivered. Payment will be posted correctly, no donation. Organizer access remains on hold pending etiquette and training. I did not wait to see if the dots pulsed. Boundaries don't ask for read receipts. By late afternoon, the house had returned to its usual sounds: the slow tick of the hallway clock, the hum of the fridge, a dog barking 2 streets over. I placed A22 in the caterer's memo behind minutes and labeled a tab in pencil: clarity, not cruelty. People confuse the two because clarity refuses to perform comfort. It does not punish, it names. And when something is named correctly, it can be carried correctly by the right hands. I brewed tea and left the phone face down. Outside, Sugarland held its pale winter sky, and somewhere a sprinkler ticked against frozen grass like a metronome practicing scales. I rinsed the cup, dried it, and set it in its spot. Then I sat with the binder closed beside me, the quiet occupying the room, the way it used to when a baby finally slept. I hadn't fixed everything. I had fixed my end of the ledger. Payment when it arrives will be numbers and a memo that says what it is. Apology, if it ever comes, will be words. I am not waiting for either to make breakfast tomorrow. I will meet my son for brunch when the receipt posts because I promised my younger self a life that doesn't depend on anyone else's caption. I am a woman who keeps records and keeps her peace. Today, both were kept. Before I turned out the kitchen light, Aileen's second email arrived. Finance had reissued payment with the proper invoice references. Remittance advice attached totals matching the recon packet. 1099 NEC to follow. I printed the advice, signed the bottom corner out of habit, and filed it behind the late fee notice. The binder made a thud when it closed, a reassuring sound of pages aligning. Tidy order is not the same as victory. It is a floor you can stand on. I wrote one sentence on a card and pinned it above my desk. Name things by their names. Under it, smaller, and let the record hold. The record would if I kept it fed with dates and documents, not with speeches. The record would also be there the day my son was ready to read it without flinching. That was the work I could do. That was enough for tonight. Saturday's sun leaned through the clubhouse cafe windows, laying warm squares across the small table I picked in the corner. I arrived a few minutes early, ordered coffee for myself and water for Avery, and set my leather folder beside the salt shaker. Inside was a single sheet printed in 12-point type, titled Boundaries Effective Immediately. It felt light and heavier than any feast I'd ever carried. Avery came in without theatrics. No sunglasses, no ducked head, just my son in a flannel shirt that made him look younger than he is. He sat, exhaled, and slid a small envelope onto the table. I wrote this, he said. Reading it might keep me from drifting. He opened the card and read 10 short sentences, one by one like counting out screws. I believed silence was neutral. It was not. I let other people narrate you. I chose convenience over courage. I regret it. He didn't pad the edges. I didn't rescue him from the pauses. When he finished, he folded the card and placed it by the water glass like a coaster he meant to keep. I took my sheet from the folder and slid it across. 3 things I said, keeping my voice even. Direct contact, only no intermediaries. No labels or tasks attached to my name without my consent. Logistics by email, feelings face-to-face. I'm willing to try monthly brunches, no holidays for now. He read, nodded at each line as if sealing boxes, then uncapped his pen. I accept, he said simply. He signed the bottom with his full name, the date, and his number, then drew a small box and wrote, received and accepted. He checked it. Our server set omelets between us. The ink dried while the steam rose. I breathed easier without making a show of it. Release can be quiet. He slid another envelope across thin official. Inside was a printed photo from the minutes where the line, Service Arlis D, had been stricken and corrected to family guest. I needed to see it to believe it. He said not defensive, not needy, just honest. Now I do. I tapped the margin where the timestamp lived. Minutes don't raise their voice, I said. They still get heard. We ate like people who had been hungry too long, not for food, but for a plain table that didn't tilt. He asked 2 practical questions about the invoices. I answered with numbers and dates. When the check came, he reached for it and I let him, not because it fixed anything, but because one small courtesy is a hinge that can carry weight if we don't lean our whole future on it. Monday brought pens and paper, nothing grand. In the HOA office, Ramsey and Aileen had arranged the file like a map, certified delivery receipt clipped to the front. Reconciliation statement with the corrected memo lines. Note of 10999 processing. I initialed beside each exhibit code. The fluorescent lights hummed. Outside, a wind tugged at the flag. Jody arrived on time, a lone coat folded over her arm like a shield she chose not to lift. She said nothing to me. Ramsey slid the etiquette acknowledgement across the table and read the key lines aloud for the recorder. She signed where the tab told her to sign. Then she handed him a typed apology, properly addressed Mrs. Arlis Danner, family guest. He date-stamped it, wrote entered to file, and placed it neatly under the clip. I didn't reach for it. Some pages are better honored as part of a record, not souvenirs to take home. Ramsey cleared his throat and read the disposition. Organizer privileges suspended through the spring season. Training required for reinstatement. A new option will be offered to resident hosts the Quiet Writer guest classification controls, AV lock discipline, and invoice memo standards. Aileen glanced my way and gave a small, unadorned smile. It wasn't victory, it was infrastructure, and sometimes that's the difference between a room that holds and one that collapses. On the way out, I took the long loop along the lake. January sun balanced on the water. The geese pushed a slow wake that reshaped itself without protest. I texted Avery brunch again next month, same table. 3 dots, then, yes. I'll bring the card and keep adding to it. Not with excuses. I put the phone away. The path crunched under my shoes in a crisp rhythm that made sense. At home, I pinned 3 things on the corkboard above my desk, my 1-page boundaries, the agenda line where my label was corrected, Avery's signature of acceptance. Under them, on a narrow strip of paper, I wrote the sentence that carried me from the call at 2:19 to this quiet kitchen. Clarity is not cruelty. I straightened the strip, stepped back, and let the house take one deep, even breath. I boiled water and set out 2 cups. One for now, and one for later. There is still grief in the corners. Holidays will stay unclaimed for a while, but a life can be stitched from steady seams, monthly tables, direct lines, clean memos, no captions needed. If there is a feast in my future, it will be one I host at a table that names every guest by their proper name, including mine with no job title attached. When the kettle clicked, I thought of the stopped clock I hadn't fixed the day Jody barked her command. I walked to it and wound it just once, hearing the gears catch and the hands move past 2:19 without ceremony. Some lines are meant to hold, others are meant to let time start again. I poured the tea, sat down, and let the quiet settle. Like snow, nobody needs to shovel soon. I watched the minute hand find pace. I'm Arlis. If this story stays with you, let it be this clarity isn't cruelty, and boundaries are a form of love for yourself and for the family that can meet you there. I learned to answer disrespect with policy, not drama, to speak softly and keep records, to forgive without volunteering for the same wound twice. What would you protect starting today? What boundary would let you breathe again? If this touched you, drop a 1 or tell me where you're watching from. If not, say why. I listen. And please subscribe for more quiet power stories from American families. Share this with a friend who needs permission to say no. Your voice matters here. Kindness and candor are both welcome. Stay a while.